So last week we had Dr. Jill Simons, the executive director of the American College of Pediatricians, on to discuss the Great Barrington Declaration version for trans ideology that they have launched. They had a press conference of it as well, calling on professional medical associations to stop promoting ascientific remedies to gender dysphoria that harm young people in particular. So the puberty blockers, the transition surgeries. And in part, this is a response to the zeitgeist behind the World Professional Association of Transgender Health, WPATH. This is one of the leading promoters of this ghoulish business. And you see their influence, and it goes in both directions, at places like Lurie Children's Hospital in Chicago. The funding from the Pritzker family also helps. So two reporters for the Daily Caller obtained footage and a number of documents from WPATH's September 2022 Global Education Institute conference, which included some members of the group questioning the organization's standards of care, and some uncomfortable admissions, as well as some of the ghoulish statements you've heard from these pro-trans medical professionals at particular hospitals or academic institutions that have been exposed by the likes of Matt Walsh and Chris Rufo over the last several years. And then sort of they take the videos down and they announce they're not doing it anymore, and sometimes they're still doing it. So this is a real political movement, masquerading as a as providers of medical services and nothing more. But there is something more. Particularly, there's something more when you're having to tackle topics like, can psychosis stop you from giving informed consent?
Is there more specific ideas about what sorts of psychiatric indications might be a contraindication when a lot of the literature shows that depression, anxiety, suicidal ideation improve with hormone therapy? What might be a contraindication? I hear a lot about psychosis and estrogen, so if you can specifically speak to that and to anything else that might be more than just this person's really unstable, is it a good or bad idea to start, or more data or resources where I could go?
I don't think, so my personal opinion is that this is not a thing for either hormone. I think I would probably frame it, are they mentally stable to go for wisdom tooth extraction right now? Like
no, that's very helpful. The idea of
an elective surgery thing, or something where they can both give consent, could cope with an unexpected event that took place on it, responsible enough to do with it.
It's about capacity and self-management.
Yeah,
I can assess for that.
Yeah, I think that's where I'd frame that. I don't think it's a hormone thing. Again, most people get happier, which is why we're doing that, which tends to be helpful for mental health.
That is extremely helpful. I will be quoting you.
Good. Got it.
I have had a few.
That's a nice end run around the issue of consent for somebody who has a diagnosed mental health condition.
Why are they laughing?
Megan Brock is an investigative researcher for the Daily Caller. She's one of the two journalists on this case. Megan, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
So, I mean, there's a lot here, and there's a lot of videos that Daily Caller has posted, video snippets along the lines of the one that we just played that speak to sort of the philosophy or ideology behind the WPATH leadership. But why don't you characterize it for us from what you've obtained and poured through?
Yeah, I mean, I think the comment about why they're laughing, I think there were a lot of laughs throughout these videos. I mean, what I heard through this is almost 30 hours of footage from WPATH, the World Professional Association of Transgender Health, which, if your listeners don't know, is an extremely influential organization, particularly for insurance coverage, for institutions. A lot of even governments rely on WPATH clinical recommendations to determine who is going to get these transgender medical interventions and how they're going to be given. So what I heard throughout these tapes is that there's a lot of unknowns. I mean, we heard doctors over and over again talking about unknowns. And then the part about consent that you just played, I mean, the idea that even people with a mental condition like schizophrenia, the belief that they can still consent to these irreversible treatments when I think previously people understood, somebody who is not in their right mind really can't consent to something that might, for example, totally transform their body.
Yeah, I mean, and also too the consent issues surrounding minors, of course, is a main focus. And you say, well, you've got parental consent or the consent of a guardian, an adult, and yet we've heard cases where parents have a lot of regret after the fact because it wasn't really informed consent that the medical professional or the institution got, because they provided a very stilted view of what was happening to their child, essentially taking the position, as these ideologues take, that we're going to go in whichever direction the minor child wants us to go.
Right. I mean, it's kind of this path of affirm or else. I mean, there's even throughout the country, we're seeing parents having their children taken away from them because they won't affirm this delusion, this magical thinking that you can change your sex. So I think that for parents, there's absolutely a lot of coercion when they're making these decisions. One of the things that they're told is, do you want a dead daughter or an alive son? And that's obviously not even factual. I mean, there was a study that came out, I think, in Germany last week, suggesting that I think it was 72% of kids would kind of come out of their distress by the time they go through puberty. And that's something that's been known for a long time, that these kids will go through puberty and the vast majority of them are going to come out and will have alleviated their distress and will feel comfortable with their sex. So, seeing that there's so much focus on getting kids on a medical pathway, which is going to make them a lifelong medical patient, is just very concerning.
It sounds like these kids are being used as guinea pigs, like they're being experimented on. Because in one of the videos, a doctor told attendees that children should be informed that cross-sex hormones will likely make them infertile, but admitted that he prescribed them anyway if a child says that they want the treatment, regardless of the future consequences.
Right. I mean, I think when we talk about informed consent, I mean, I know when I was 12, 13, 14, I'm a mother now, but I had no idea what being a woman was or what being a mother would be like. So the idea that any child can consent to the loss of their fertility is just crazy. I mean, we know that that's unethical, that we don't allow that. And yet with these treatments, like to your point, there's a known risk and a very high risk of infertility, and yet kids are being given them.
No, wait a second. No. I understand from WPATH affiliated doctors that if you don't go along with that as the adult, you're the one who has a mental illness.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, there was, one doctor, the question of, so if, you have the puberty block, this is kind of the first step of being medicalized, then you have sex change hormones, and then you have the surgeries. And one of the doctors actually questioned if they even were to save the eggs. So that's something we'll say for puberty blockers. Oh, well, we'll sperm bank or we'll save your eggs. And this one doctor said, well, would those eggs even be fertile? Because the children haven't even gone through puberty yet to have their reproductive system get to a point where it can be fertile. So, I mean, it's really bizarre to hear people who are part of a profession that parents have long trusted, right, really saying some things that are very, very questionable, to say the least.
Well, the euphemistic language to all of this, is should be setting off alarms. I noted from your reporting a surgeon euphemistically referring to a phalloplasty procedure,
What's that?
going from vagina to penis. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. That's an adventure for a young person.
Yeah.
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 It's like going to Great America, going to Six Flags. It's an adventure.
Yeah, I don't know that that's what I would call personally an adventure. I mean, the phalloplasty series, that same surgeon said with the radial arm phalloplasty. So that's where when they take a very deep amount of tissue, it's not just like a superficial skin graft, to then create a fake penis for a woman. said that the average amount of surgical procedures was 6 surgeries. So, I mean, you think about all the things that you can read the reporting in the article. I mean, I won't get into it because it's quite graphic, but it's important for people to understand just how this is really disrupting normative function and has a very high complication rate. And the doctor said could be as high as 80%. And we're talking about a function that's extremely important to the body. You have to be able to urinate to excrete all kinds of bad toxins from your body. It's very important. So you're taking a normative function. Someone's body who's healthy and functioning, they're just struggling with mental distress, and you're really creating less function and medicalizing them and making them a patient for life.
You could talk to a lot of the residents of Hinsdale, the men there, about having a fake penis.
Oh, stop. So who is on this WPATH committee, this World Professional Association for Transgender Health? Are they all from all over North America? Are they all Americans? What's their backgrounds?
Yeah, so it's all throughout the world. There is a subsidiary regional group called WPATH, but these are all doctors who are involved in transgender medicine. And from these tapes, I think one of the things that was really significant about these tapes is that this was a conference that was training other doctors in transgender health. So if you went through these videos, you could get a transgender health certification, basically. So these are very top experts, people who are very well-known, I would say well-known in this field, saying that, things like, hey, we don't really know how puberty blockers are going to impact the brain development. We understand that when we give a child puberty blockers, they're probably not getting the calcium they need, which means they're at risk for developing osteoporosis. So you're hearing people who are, supposedly the experts in this field just raise some very legitimate concerns that a lot of people, like the pediatrician group calling for an end of these medical interventions in the U.S. are raising.
Right, and yet you hear politicians and LGBTQ2SIA++ advocates talking about, puberty blockers are medically safe. And in point of fact, we don't know that. And the scientific evidence, and this is what we got from Dr. Jill Simons as well, the scientific evidence indicates that it's more likely than not that they're very unsafe when it comes to the development of young people. And so, it's the euphemisms, the dishonesty. It all should have the spidey senses of parents tingling, shouldn't it?
Yeah, I would say to parents to absolutely, if you're in a situation where you're facing a child who is experiencing distress, to seek out good resources and people who will help you, because we want kids, like I said, reference this study. It's been well known, something that people have been saying for a while, is that the majority of kids are going to resolve this distress by the time they finish puberty, by the time they reach adulthood. And we want to see kids reach adulthood with healthy bodies, not with things like having their breasts removed or having had been on medication that might make them infertile for the rest of their lives. Even with the testosterone, for girls, one of the irreversible effects is it could deepen your voice. You could have male pattern baldness. So these are things that these poor girls. A lot of this is happening. Girls, happens to boys too, but it's girls are being more impacted by this social contagion, what it really is. You think about these girls having this for the rest of their lives.
Well, the other thing too is it should strike people as odd, the desire to cut parents out of the equation if they're not fully on board, if they have these sorts of questions that you're raising. And we see legislation pending in California, for example, to do just that. Why would you want to cut a parent out of a significant medical decision for their child? That should, as I said, have parents expressing considerable skepticism.
Absolutely. And I think that this ideology really views parents or anybody who doesn't, quote unquote, affirm the child's new chosen sex as harming their child. So the system is increasingly viewing parents, even from a legal perspective, as you see these laws around the country trying to get passed. It really does view parents who don't buy into this as the problem, which is very scary. And to your point, it should really concern parents.
From the conference where you obtained all these videos and documents from 2022, is there any talk about the money to be made?
Yeah.
Because we've seen some of this, like I remember a hospital associated with Vanderbilt University, you had one of the explanatory videos about what you can charge for and how much money an institution can make from these procedures if you do X, Y, and Z. And then that was taken down because it was, of course, viewed as a bit too, too much disclosure. It was a little bit, came across as perhaps as a little bit craven, and heaven forbid they come across as anything other than altruistic. We know that some of the money behind the institutions from wealthy leftist families like the Pritzkers. But what about discussions among these professionals about the money to be made?
Yeah, I mean, this was primarily about just the actual medical procedures and also the mental health aspects. But I've read reports separately and estimates that the sex change surgery market could reach, like, I think over $5 billion by 2030. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, when I'm listening to, particularly with the surgery piece of it, you think about potentially six different surgical procedures, and possibly needing, I mean, for the phalloplasty, that's the creation of the fake penis. One of the things that happens is that the urethra can narrow and it has to be reopened up. So, I mean, you have patients who are going to be going back to the medical system for multiple surgeries, and you also have all of the medication. You have there's all kinds of things. There's such a huge open door for a lot of different procedures, which equals a lot of money.
And do they want the insurance companies to cover this, the cost of the?
Of course they do.
Yeah, well, I mean, a lot of many insurance companies, even state insurance, like Medicaid plans or CHIP plans, will cite the WPATH standards of care to help guide physicians and insurance companies on
of course
when and how they should approve these. So that's. Yeah.
Well, I mean, how many individuals could afford this out of pocket? Of course, they have to go to the state. I mean, in point of fact, California is doing it for migrants, for illegal immigrants, for God's sakes, because it's such a cash cow and a constituency developer. I mean, of course. Megan Brock, investigative researcher for the Daily Caller, the series, the WPATH Tapes, over at dailycaller.com. Check it out. Check out the videos, the documents they were able to obtain. Megan Brock, thanks so much for joining us. Great work. We appreciate it.
Yes, thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. And you can follow her on Twitter or X at Meg, M-E-G-E Brock, and she joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
There's only one radio show in Chicago talking about today's biggest stories and telling you what they really mean. That show is this one, Chicago's Morning Answer on AM 560, The Answer.
BP's Whiting Refinery is hosting a community night on Thursday, June 20th from 3 to 7 p.m. Come learn more about how an oil refinery works, products made, and the people who make it run. There will be food, fire trucks, and STEM activities for kids. It's the Whiting Refinery Community Night, Thursday, June